Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar on building products in the AI era. I am Pranav Dar, I'm a senior editor at Analytics Vidhya. We are one of the largest data science communities in India and across the globe. Today we are delighted to host Devdoot Mukherjee. He's the head of data science at Hike. Devdoot leads a team that creates unique data products to weave sticky experiences in the Hike app and solves unique problems that arise as Hike tries to bring the next billion people online. Prior to Hike, Devdoot was leading the data science programs at Myntra and has also previously worked for IBM Research. He's actually a regular speaker at various AI and ML forums, has co-authored over 20 papers at international conferences, and filed over 25 patents. That's incredible. It's a real pleasure to have him as today's presenter.
Yeah, thanks, Pranav. I hope I'm audible fine. Uh, so, at any point in time, if I break up or if I'm not audible, Pranav, please sort of interject and let me know.
Sure.
Delighted to do this webinar in association with Analytics Vidhya. This is one of the events in uh, uh, in a line of series of events that we are doing the end of this month with Analytics Vidhya, leading up to an ML hackathon. Which will be a contest on Analytics Vidhya platform where people can solve the link prediction problem on Hike's social network. So that's the lead up to that event. We are doing this webinar today, and for folks who are in Delhi, they can attend a meetup on Saturday. At the Hike headquarters. So thanks everyone for joining in today. The topic for today's webinar is building AI, building products in the AI era. Right, so it's a fairly interesting topic. We are stepping into a new generation of computing, which is being called the AI era, and there are a lot of changes, right? From if you compare to the old, like the previous era, which was the internet era, the mobile era. So so this talk today will be in two parts. The first part is really the meat of the talk, which is building products in the AI era, which will focus on questions such as what really changes in the AI era. What are some of the roles that become important? How can companies be successful, right? What defines successful AI products, and so on. And the second part of the talk, I'll talk a little bit about the work that we are doing at Hike in the data science team, just to make certain things concrete and just to give some of you folks what happens in data science teams, in the internet companies, and especially as we step into this AI era, what kind of products are we talking about building, right? So that's pretty much the agenda. So I get started. Um, so I'll start today's talk with a couple of my favorite quotes, right? And this is the first one. It's from Andrew Ng, and it's pretty famous nowadays. AI is the new electricity, and beyond just being a fancy quote, this is important because this, in many ways, really sums up what the AI era is all about, right? And so what Andrew Yang has done, he's equated AI to electricity. So what he means is, just as electricity has transformed our lives in the last century, and it's sort of it become a part of our lives as in a way that you cannot imagine life without electricity, right? Pretty much we take electricity for granted. We get so pissed off when we have power cuts and so on. And AI and the people, how users and customers perceive AI will sort of take the same dimension, right? So AI will be ubiquitous. Pretty much everything will be powered by AI, just as electricity powers everything around us. And more importantly, people will have a very high bar on experiences, and they'll expect everything to be intelligent. So more about it in a while. So the second quote is data is the new oil. And this one is a little bit dated. It came up in 2006, but it when looked at in conjunction with the first quote, it starts making a lot more sense, right? So just as oil in isolation is not as useful, but once you harness oil through the refineries and finally produce something like electricity from oil, right, through our power plants, then it sort of really transforms our lives, right? So electricity transforms our lives, and data is the new oil. So what oil is to electricity, data is to AI, right? And that's sort of a good way to look at it. And so these two sort of really sort of sum up what the AI era is about. And what I'll do next is I'll talk about a couple of things, 2-3 things, which really define an AI era for me, and what it means to build products, right? So the first one is the following. The era that we are entering, we are all set to see a step jump in customer expectations, right? So customers, the bar of our experience is going to reach all-time high levels, right? They'll expect nothing to be less than intelligent, right? They'll expect every experience to sort of wrap around themselves. When they use a product, they'd expect that the product knows what the customer's next step will be. And hence, the product should really tailor itself, keeping that in mind, right? So this is like a wave change in way customers will start perceiving products. And that is the reason why AI, it's a necessity for embedding AI into products, right? So that's number one. The second thing, which is really standing out in the AI era, is AI is everywhere, right? In the last decade or so, we've already seen some industries benefiting from AI, right? And the examples are things like ad tech, social media, e-commerce to a certain extent, and so on. But what the AI era is about is not about these companies so much, because they are already sort of well penetrated with AI, but it's about bringing in the revolution in all the other industries, right? Pretty much you name an industry and there is an AI use case there, and AI is sort of just getting ready to make a big impact, right? So be it agriculture, healthcare, fintech, of course, education in a big way, all the industries, right? So and this is again something which really defines the AI era. It's not just the internet companies, but every industry. The third thing which sort of really is characterizes this AI era is AI is going to be the product, right? So far, AI has been powering features inside products, right? It's sort of been always the cherry on the top. So you get 10-20% more gains in revenue or in profits or whatever is the case, or time spent using AI in your product. And what there's a term for this, they call it AI inside products, right? So AI is driving one or two features inside the product. So what we are, the shift that is happening is from AI inside products, we are going to AI first products, where AI is the product. I'll take a example over here. So one good example of an AI first products, which has been much talked about, is this content application called TikTok, right? And there have been a few other content applications in China from the same company called Toutiao and so on. All of these products have really changed the game of how content applications look like. So we've been used to consuming content on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and so on. But if you look at the what shows up in my Facebook feed or what shows up in my Twitter feed is really defined by certain actions that my contacts do, right? Or whoever I have added as friend or whoever I follow and so on. So that defines the base of the content that I will see. As against something like a TikTok, where with my usage, with every click that I do, the product is transforming and is sort of creating the feed for me. So the product is transforming. It does not depend on what my friends like, who I follow like, but it all depends on me, right? So the app really understands me, and that's, so you'll see many more examples of this particular kind, where AI will become the product, and it's no longer the cherry on the top. Right? So now, having said this, what defines success in AI era? So let's spend a little bit of time just talking about this thing. First, so the agenda that I spoke of is how to build successful AI products, but first we should understand what success means, right? And if we know the major ingredients of success, then we'll make some headway. So what I put on the slide over here is a formula for success in AI era, right? And it's a simple formula. You can see three variables there, A, B, and C. And the equation reads A squared plus B times C. And clearly, the variable A, or the factor A, is by far the most important over here. And B is important, and C is a multiplicative factor, right? So I'll get to sort of, I'd love to have conducted a poll on this and what you guys think of what A, B, and C are, but the format of the webinar does not allow us to do this. So I'll go away and sort of disclose what I mean by these factors. So what does A mean? A stands for data defensibility, right? So and this is not a surprise. It's got to do something with data, because I already spoke of data is the new oil, and that is what powers all AI products. So what does data defensibility mean? What I mean by data defensibility is, so in order to get to a successful product, right? A successful product by definition needs to be defensible. Right? You create something and a competition sort of copies that and does it 5x better than you. That's not fun, right? So that's not a good product. So what is good is if you create some product based on some data set, right? And the competition really finds it hard to get to the same level of richness or the quality of the data set, right? So the quality of the data set matters, the scale of the data set matters, because the larger the scale of the data, the more accuracy of your algorithms and so on. So the first factor that I talk, which defines success, is how defensible is the data set on top of which you're basing your product. Okay? The second thing which is important to build a product, to build a company, is the quality of your ML talent, right? And really, there's a mad rush to get the best of the ML talent. The demand is much higher than the supply of high quality ML talent. So getting the best folks on board is very, very important, right? And how do you sort of go about doing it? I'll talk a little bit about that later. But let me get to the third variable. And the third variable is building an AI first culture, right? And the reason this is multiplicative and not additive is, even if you have the data, right? Even if you have a solid machine learning team, if you don't have the right environment or the right culture in the company, then you would not create successful products, right? And I'll talk a little bit more to like later on in this talk around how building AI products goes beyond the machine learning team. It's not just the machine learning team's responsibility. So that is where the culture comes in. And that is where like culture also defines processes and so on. So these three things together are some of the most important things, most important ingredients that would go in to define a successful product, right? So if you have these three, like if you have a highly defensible data set, if you have a really strong and smart data science or machine learning team, and you have the right AI first culture, you are more likely to be successful, right? So that's how I sort of define the formula for success, right? So now, formula for success is good, but what leads to such successful products, right? So how can you be sure that you're on the right track, building a successful AI product? And one of the things that I'll talk about, which really is characteristic of AI products or successful AI products, is that they enter a virtuous cycle fairly early in their lifetime, right? So if you are entering a virtuous cycle of the one that I'll talk about, you can be sure that you are on the right track, right? So what is the virtuous cycle of AI products? So it goes as follows. So there are three parts to it. So you have customers, you have data, and then you really have the product, right? And the algorithms and everything is part of the product, right? So the cycle goes as follows. So everything starts by understanding the customer need and figuring out what data set can you have that sort of can be used to build models to service that need, right? And let's say you find something, and the initial data set is good, and you come up with an algorithm, and it actually finds some customers, right, who like the product because it's differentiated and it solves the customer need well, more than probably other products in the market, or it's a really unique need that you found, which does not has not been serviced so far, right? And that will help you collect some data with your first set of customers. If you design your product right, you'll collect more data, which will improve the quality of your model, and which will get you more customers, and so on, and the loop continues. And so this is the virtuous cycle. So when choosing your product bets, it's very important to keep in mind whether it's like you build a model. You can build a model for anything, right? But it could be a one-off model. And the model could be such that it does not improve with data, right? Or it does not help you bring in more customers who give you more data and so on. So it's important to understand and be very, very clear about what is your virtuous cycle, right, of the data product. The next thing, which sort of is an extension of the data product, is you add a fourth dimension, and I talked about ML talent, and it sort of feeds in and reinforces this particular cycle, right? So if you have a high quality data set, the right talent will always flock to the companies which have large data sets and offers fairly unique research challenges, right? So if you get talent in, now this talent will help you further improve your product, further improve the choice of the algorithms, further improve the way you see data, the way you sort of feed in data to product loops and so on. And then that sort of, if the improved product will get you more customers, that will give you more data, and the cycle continues, right? And at some point, you will sort of move on. If you're a successful company, you'll find other opportunities, and you'll create more than one data product, right? And what is really ideal is when you're expanding and if you're creating multiple data product or AI product, and each one of them have a virtuous cycle, if those AI products reinforce each other, right? So that's sort of the then you have a cycle which sort of influences, reinforces another cycle, and so on, and the virtuosity of all of this really keeps on increasing, right? So that's the ideal world. A good example will be, let's say you're building an education product, right? Or you're in the education space. You just created an app for students, and now you're successful, and now you create an app for teachers, right? So how can the teacher's application benefit from all the data set that you're collecting in the student's application? So what are the most common mistakes that students make, and can that feed into the data product of the teacher's application, and so on? So that's sort of the overall idea. Okay. So what I'll do next is, so this virtuous cycle is all very good, but how do you increase your probability to get on this virtuous AI cycle, right? So how do you choose your bets so that you increase your chances of getting into this particular cycle, right? And a couple of recommendations there. The first one is, it's always beneficial to focus AI on core product loops and not on fringes, right? And there are multiple reasons, good reasons why you should do that. The first of all, if you look at your core product loops, those are the product loops which have the widest funnel of data, right? So if you're developing something, it's possible that the first iteration of the product itself will be reasonably good, right? Will be reasonably accurate, because you would have a reasonably sized data set to train your model, right? So that's number one. Number two, it's once you improve this loop, this will maximize your chances of getting more customers, because the way it works is the word of mouth for a product is most tied to your core product loops, right? If your core product works, then you maximize your chances of word of mouth, right? So if you can improve the core product, then you increase the word of mouth, and then you get more customers, and the virtuous cycle of more customers getting in more data that I was talking about, that gets kicked off. Okay, so The second thing, which sort of we should always keep in mind, is focus on data that is unique to your product. And this sort of absolutely ties to the defensibility point, that if you pick up data sets and pick up to build products on data sets which is unique to your product flows, and even better if those product flows are under IP, then you make it that much more harder for your competition to get it. The third thing, again, as we said in the equation itself, AI ML talent is most critical, right? So how can you steadily attract top talent? And steadily is the key word here, right? So like there's a mad rush to get the top AI talent. So how can you really get the best talent ahead of everyone else, right? So what does the best talent look for, and how can you maximize your chances of getting them? So a couple of things which sort of companies can do. One of the things is like beyond like interesting and large data sets and all of that that we talked about. I think the best talent is the best way to attract good talent is if you start publishing at top conferences and really show them that you're doing cutting edge work, which is not just state of the art, but pushing the boundaries on state of the art, right? So that's the best way to attract top talent in AI. Right, and which is needed because like the state of the art is changing so fast. Every couple of months, whatever was state of the art 2 months back is not state of the art now, and so on. So just to keep up pace with the rapid advances in this discipline, it's important to have people who can do research, can understand the latest advances and go beyond, right? So that is one. The second thing which you can do is you can catch the young talent early, right? And in order to do that, your collaboration with academia and so on, all of those things help that spread the word, right? So this is one more important thing that absolutely maximizes your chances of creating successful products. Okay, so with that, I'll do a little bit of a segue into what are the competencies in an AI team. I spoke of talent, so just to continue on that point and talk about what kinds of talent are we talking about, and what are typical expected competencies in an AI team, right? And there are largely three broad competencies. The first one, of course, is machine learning knowledge, knowledge of probability, statistics, of course, deep learning, both theoretical as well as applied knowledge, and so on. So that's the first one. The second thing is because we are working at scale, we are working on creating data products which should be able to deal with scale, your software engineering and knowledge of best practices, good coding, good design, and so on, and the ability to deal with large-scale data, right? So large-scale data processing frameworks and so on. So that's the second competency. And the third competency is again, very, very important, which is product thinking, right? And what product thinking is all about is it's about understanding the customer, right? So what are the needs of the customer? What are the right metrics that would be able to evaluate the product and so on, right? So the ability to slice and dice data and choosing the right metrics and conduct experiments in a systematic manner by proving hypothesis and so on. So broadly speaking, these are the three main competencies that should be there in AI team. And the ideal data scientist sits at the intersection. He sort of checks off all of these three competencies, is sort of outstanding in all three. But more often than not, that ideal data scientist is elusive. So if you check off 2 out of these 3, you're sort of a reasonable hire in most AI teams, right? The roles in AI teams and titles are defined by what is your core competency, right? So everyone is really on the spectrum, right? So there are these 3 competencies, and like let's say you score 5 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 in one, and more or less in the other. So what is your most prominent competency that often defines the role or the designation or the title that you get, or the career path that you're set up on? And if it's machine learning is the core competence, then you're on the machine learning scientist track. If software engineering or data engineering is your core competence, but you're interested in machine learning, then you're on a machine learning engineer. And if product thinking and slicing data and so on is a core competence, then these titles tend to vary from one company to another. In India, it's largely called data analysts. In some of the US companies, this is called a data scientist. And say they sort of distinguish between machine learning teams and data science teams in the US companies. In India, pretty much people use machine learning and data science interchangeably. Okay. So that's that. But as I said, building an AI product goes beyond just the realms of the AI team, right? Building an AI product is everyone's responsibility. And like there are different roles which will be transformed as we enter the AI era, and their job descriptions will change, right? I'll talk in a little more detail about the product manager role today, but any other role, so the UX designer role, his responsibility will change. So every time he designs the UX, he should be thinking about what is the data, what is the virtuous cycle that I am trying to accelerate, right? What data do I need to collect to be able to fuel that? How do we get positive and negative signals that is likes and dislikes of customers on a particular recommendation or anything that we are showing them? Like just the positive examples is not good enough. How do you get the negative examples? So this is a very good challenge for any UX designer building an AI product. If you look at the quality engineering role, the QA role is again will be transformed. So how do you do user acceptance testing for an experience which is probabilistic, right? So all our testing teams they swear by determinism, and they swear by like this is 100% solid and so on. In an AI product, it's not like that, right? So how do you sort of do testing of AI products? And it's not just evaluating or testing the experience, but how do you put quality checks on data governance? How do you ensure that all the data pipelines that you have are feeding in clear and clean data? How do you ensure that the assumptions that your model is built upon is not changing down the line? How do you ensure that the feature distributions are not changing, and so on. So all of these are quality issues, and going ahead into the AI era, expect the quality assurance role to lay much more emphasis on these questions, right? So for today, what I'll do is I'll stress on the product manager role, because that is sort of product managers, as you know, are sort of the CEO of the product, right? Like, how does a product manager's role change? So what's an AI product manager? Let's look at a few important things for a product manager, and how it's sort of changing from a mobile first or an internet era to the AI era. Right. So the first thing that sort of comes to mind, and which the product manager should understand, is you should not write a product spec to do X, right? You should write a product spec to help a machine to do X. And this is a significant shift in the way you think, right? Because product managers are very, very hardwired in sort of laying down requirements, but and if you help a machine do something, how can you spell out things which may not be obvious to machines, which may be to humans, and so on. So how do you focus on features, signals, etc. in your spec, more than the exact logic of what needs to be done, right? Or how it needs to be done. So you're sort of wiring the brain, how the brain functions, and not really spelling out how to do a certain job. So that's the first thing. The second thing, which is very, very important, is you need to be comfortable with non-determinism, right? And this is something which not a whole lot of folks beyond the machine learning scientists are comfortable with, right? So everyone wants guarantees. And in a probabilistic world, or in a machine learning world, you cannot guarantee 100% an outcome. So people must realize that all, like, something which is very likely is as good as an experience as an 100% kind of an experience, right? So this is again a mental shift, which is a very important one. The third one is around strategic data acquisition. We talked a little bit about it, how UXers or how product people should always be on the eye to collect data which can improve a model or create a new model for a certain experience. But I'll sort of spell out a word of caution here, because many companies have sort of gone overboard with it, and they've sort of been reckless in collecting more and more data, whether they need it or not. And what ends up happening is you end up breaking users' trust, right? And once that happens, you cannot go back. So keeping in mind users' trust, you sort of collect data in a responsible manner, and collect any data that helps you improve the overall experience of your product. The fourth thing that a product manager, so product managers are all about deciding MVPs, how do you scope the MVP, how do you iterate beyond that, and so on. So one of the things which sort of stands out that a product manager needs to do in an AI era is, how do you decide the accuracy bar for a model which is good enough for an MVP launch, right? This is really tricky, and even like ML scientists, of course, cannot do it. Product managers probably stand a better chance because they're closer to the customer. But what they really need to do is they need to have an understanding of what the metrics that are being quoted by the ML scientists, something like an AAC or precision recall, etc., really mean to the end user, right? So how does this metric translate to the quality of the overall user experience? And what is that bar on AUC, which is good enough for an MVP launch, right? So they need to develop this gut feel. And beyond an MVP, how do you decide whether to iterate or pivot into something new? How do you like whether you stand a chance to improve the model and improve the customer experience as a result? And so you iterate, or you just drop the product and you pivot to something else, right? So, and how do you get to these decisions is again it could be tricky. What is needed is the product managers should develop some kind of a gut call in like we mentioned like improvements in accuracy is all about more data. So more data means more accurate models. So what people need to develop a gut for is how much of data leads to how much of accuracy improvement, right? So if that kind of a thing, sort of a gut is clear, then you continue investing in something, or you sort of pivot to something. The final point that I'll mention, but definitely, so this is last but not the least, is people can these product managers can really help counter biases, right? And much has been talked about biases in AI models. There are very, very famous stories around how there have been gender biases, racial biases, and in different models, like a certain gender is appropriate for a certain job and not for some other jobs, and so on. And this really snowballs into really detrimental stuff for the company. So a product manager, since the product manager is really closest to the customer, product manager can help the ML scientists recognize these biases early on and help course correct. Okay, so that's about the product manager's role. So I'm sort of at the top of the end of the first section that I largely wanted to cover today. I'll talk a little bit about the work that we are doing at AI at Hike. I am not doing very well on time, so I'll probably rush through this piece and give you an overall flavor. I won't cover much of the later sections, but just to give you a sense before I open up for questions today, what are some of the areas that we are working in the AI team at Hike? So these are 4 or 5 areas that I've listed on the slide. Natural language processing is very, very important to us as an area, perhaps the most important one. I'll talk a little bit about natural language processing and what problem that we are solving. Relevance and ranking, building recommendation systems, building personalization across the app is an important area of focus. Social network analysis, being a social application and a social platform, the social graph is one of our biggest assets. And you'll see, like, for those of you who will participate in the ML hackathon, will get to see a snapshot of this network and we'll get a sense of the problems that we solve. So link prediction as a problem is of enormous importance to us. How do you recommend friends? How do you recommend who a user can invite, and so on? How do you do viral growth modeling, churn modeling, everything through social network analysis? Computer vision. Historically, we've done quite a bit of work on the High camera, where we've introduced filters. We've worked on features like cartoonizing photos and so on. Right now, we are sort of looking at features where you can create an avatar automatically from a photo, and how do you render different emotions and expressions on these avatars and so on. Right, so these are the different areas. I'm sort of out of time. Yeah, let's take questions maybe, and then I wanted to give you at least one flavor of a problem that I was talking about. Maybe I'll come at the end and talk about it for a few minutes. But let's take a few questions
Sure,
at
sure.
this.
So, one question we had was, is it preferable to specialize in a particular stream in data science, like say NLP or computer vision, or is it good to be a data science or AI generalist?
Yeah, so good question. I think like it's no different from how you approach a generalist versus a specialist question in software engineering, right? So if you're starting off your career, you should be a generalist. You get exposure to many different um, disciplines, and you basically sort of whatever problem comes at you, you start doing the best possible with some guidance, and over the course in time you learn more on these topics, and then you can choose to go deep in a particular area, right? What I would say is early on, the first 2-3 years, dabble with different problems, and then as you get more and more experience, if you get lucky, you get really attached to a particular area and you want to do research, and then you can go deep and specialize in a particular area.
Sure, and we'll just take another one in the interest of time. So this is a pretty interesting one. So is stochastic modeling really required in an AI team?
Yes, so stochastic modeling, like depending on like this is sort of a word which has been it can have different connotations, but if you're talking about like stochastic optimization problems and so on, there are I talked about relevance and ranking, right? uh, uh, Many internet companies would have problems where so one of the fundamental problems, let's say in relevance and ranking, is about how do you explore new content and how do you exploit existing content, right? So that is a stochastic optimization, like stochastic modeling problem, and so on. So yes, definitely, it is important, and wide number of use cases.
So there's one question from Suvro. You talked about gathering enough data to achieve a certain degree of accuracy for a product, but data distribution is susceptible to change since often user behavior changes over time. So how do you make your models more adept to such changes? How do you adapt them?
Yeah, so good question. Like data distribution changes is something that you want to always watch out for. I mentioned that like in the quality assurance team, that should be a core uh, part of whatever data quality initiatives that you have. So the way you sort of adapt is you retrain your model, and based on how you see how often the data distributions is changing, and depending on what's feasible in the use case, you would determine the retraining frequency of your model. But absolutely something which is very, very important to keep an eye on.
All right, and another question is, it's very NLP specific question. So for precision, do we implement BERT algorithm at Hike, or is it the school LM models, ML models?
uh, what is the last school LM?
School machine learning models.
I do not understand what you mentioned by school LM, but we don't use BERT per se, but we use something which is very similar to BERT in principle. It is not as deep. Like BERT is like it has, I think, 12 stacks of the transformer model, like a typical BERT system. Our language modeling is not as deep, but it's similar in principle to some of the things that BERT does. It's in fact we have a paper. If you're interested, you can sort of just Google up this paper and know about what kind of models that we use to understand chat messages.
All right, and we have a couple of questions on research papers, so I'll just combine them.
Sure.
The essence is essentially, since you have a lot of, you have 25 patents filed and you have a lot of research papers, you've spoken at a lot of forums. So, for a beginner or somebody who's a little intermediate working in the industry, what would be your advice for working on these papers and submitting them to these top tier conferences?
Yeah, so I think it's important. Like you need to make time for it. Like in certain setups, it's like if you're working in a research lab, a core part of your job is that you need to create scientific impact, right? So I probably would not have gotten those many papers if I've not worked in a research lab. But having said that, even in a lot of the applied labs and startups, we are trying to publish and we encourage publications. So it's always important to publish for two reasons. The main reason is, as I mentioned, that's the best way to sort of spread out a word to the world that you're doing cutting edge work and attract more talent. But also it sort of keeps you on your toes, and you know that if you're publishing publishing a paper to a top conference, you know that you're pretty much there in the state of the art, because the reviews that you'll get from the referees and so on really give you that confidence. So yeah, so in many cases you need to sort of spend your nights and weekends to do this, but I can guarantee you that it will pay off really well.
All right. So one last question.
Yeah.
What is the growth prediction for the AI industry in India versus the rest of the world in terms of jobs, for example?
That's a hard one. I'm not an astrologer, but I think if you compare AI in India, it's we are behind. I think that's one acknowledgement that I probably will make as compared to China and the US. The Chinese companies are way ahead, and so they're sort of like, even the Chinese government has a national policy that they should be world leaders in AI by 2030. They realize the importance of AI, and like AI is the new electricity, so or AI, like data is the new oil. So like they've missed the oil generation. Like China is not probably the richest in oil, but they don't want to miss this boat. So there is a national level resolve, and that's paying off for them. We need to play catch up, but I'm sure with all the resolve and all the right talent which is coming through India can sort of do it. So there's massive demand. It's up to us to up our game, and if there's high quality work being done, jobs will be created. That's sort of a result. It will happen if we sort of have the resolve to high quality AI work.
All right, Vidhya, I think we can go ahead with your problem statement you were referring to earlier.
Yeah, so I'll spend just to give you some sort of sense of one of the most important problems that we are working on at Hike, and just to give you a sense of what kind of work happens. So like here is one of the most important problem statements at Hike. So we are out to solve what we believe is India has a massive input problem, and we are seeking a solution to that. So what is this input problem? So Indians, they prefer chatting in their own local language, right? But they can't, because like despite having local keyboards, the Indic type system is too complex. So many of these have not seen adoption. something which has seen slightly better adoption is these transliterated keyboards, which can convert transliterated input to local scripts. But what we observe at Hike is majority of the messages that get exchanged are using the English keyboard. They are in Latin script. So even though there are utterances in Indian languages, they are in Latin script, and that's how most people prefer to communicate and chat, right? So what we are feeling is, so of course this is not a great experience, right? So typing in an alien keyboard is not a great experience. So how can we make it better? And one of the solutions that we are looking towards is the stickers at Hype. So our objective is, can we create a visual expressions language, right? Where like Hike is famous for its stickers. We have stickers in local languages and so on, and our customers love it. And like they love it because the stickers allow you to visually express, and they help you to communicate your feelings and emotions, right? But the question that we are asking is, can we replace the keyboard, right? And what does it take to replace the keyboard and have people chat back to back with stickers? So that is the problem that we are sort of going after, and machine learning is sort of at the core of solving this problem, right? So what do we need to do solve this problem? We need two things. First, we need 10x sticker content. So you should have a sticker for anything that you want to say in a chat, right? And even though Hike has like 20, 30,000 stickers, we are far short of what the number should be if we were to sort of replace the keyboard, right? So you need to have a sticker for pretty much anything that you want to say across all the languages and so on. So that sort of runs into hundreds of thousands, if not millions. So how can you create that much sticker content? And then once you have that scale of sticker content, how can you recommend the right sticker at the right time, right? In a conversation, the user will will not be able to browse all the stickers and find out the right sticker. So you need to recommend based on the context of the conversation. And both of these problems we are trying to solve with machine learning. And a lot of the work that we are doing in the team is going into these two problems. So the first problem, just to I don't have time to go into details here, but at a very high level, we are solving the creation problem, where instead of creating one sticker at a time, like we used to, like artists used to create one sticker at a time, we are going to a solution where stickers automatically get assembled on the fly. So if you have a certain text for which you don't have a sticker, we'll automatically pick up a visual component. We'll automatically pick up colors, fonts, etc. And there's a script that will sort of put together a high quality sticker, right? So, and this will help us really scale to 10x and 100x stickers, and be able to create stickers for any thing that you Indians want to say. These are a few samples of what we've created. And the second problem I talked about is sticker recommendation, which is based on the chat context, based on what message that you may have received, and based on maybe one or two characters that you may have already typed. How can you predict the message, right, that you will be about to type, and pick up the relevant sticker for that predicted message? So this is the two steps that we decompose the sticker recommendation problem into. And if you're interested, you go through a paper to go into more details of this problem. Right. So the key challenge that we are solving here is making sense of this noisy transliterated text across Indian languages. The data set that we have is very, very unique, right? So it is written in English script, but it is in some other Indian language. And what is the problem with such a data set? If you write using an English script, write Hindi using an English script, there is no correct spelling, right? And we looked at our data and we saw that there are more than 350 variants for a simple phrase like kya kar raha hai, right? So how does the machine understand that all of these variants actually mean the same thing, right? How do you make sense of such data and such text? And that is where most of the NLP work is going, which will try to group together texts which mean the same thing. And these are some of the clusters that we have sort of portrayed here in the slide, like all the different variations of the same phrase. We are able to sort of automatically detect that these things being the same with the help of the deep learning NLP techniques that we have been developing. Right, so I don't have time, but if interested folks, please go and read the paper on arXiv, and feel free to reach out to us to discuss, and to always happy to take questions. So thank you so much. If there are any last questions, otherwise we close today.
Thanks, Devdut. So everyone, just a quick last minute update. So the recording will be available in a couple of days on Analytics Vidhya's channel. I just posted the link in the chat window. And as Devdut mentioned at the start, we're having a hackathon starting this weekend. It's just posted the link in the chat window again. Go ahead and register for it there. We'll see you there. And if you're in Delhi NCR, we're having a meetup on Saturday. That's this Saturday, and you can register for it here. It's free, and I hope to see you there. So with that, we'll close it out. Thanks, Devdut, so much for your time today, for presenting a wonderful session.
Thank you so much. The pleasure is all mine.
And thank you everyone for attending. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.